Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Tea Time. It's been a long time for Tea Time for a number of reasons. I've tried a number of different things. What we're going to do today is completely on the spot, 100% on the spot. I'm probably not going to do any editing at all. I haven't even read this. I just got a post. I got a post from my buddy Avix, and Avix was like, the mothership core is dead. And I was like, I don't believe you. And then this happened. There's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of interesting things happening. Let's go ahead. We're going to read it. We're going to talk about it a little bit, and feel free to share your comments in the comments section or hop on any of the streams to talk shop about this. And I want to start by talking about, okay, this is a lot of stuff. This is a big change. This is a huge reflection on Blizzard's philosophy about developing StarCraft 2 going into the future. We have this set up for another really big design patch where the design implements of the game, and we're not just balancing, right? We have a big design patch, we change the game fundamentally, we see how it feels, and then we balance throughout the year. So that way, by the time we get to BlizzCon, it's the version of the game that people know the best, they know it well, and it's as balanced as possible. I really like that cycle, but for a while, with David Kim is not on StarCraft 2, he's on another project, not to be named. David Kim had said, and I don't know if this was him or coming from the whole design team, that they wanted to make smaller and smaller and smaller changes until they pretty much didn't have to change it at all, and it just became this thing, kind of like Brood War. But it was always my opinion that StarCraft 2 and Brood War are two different ways to enjoy RTS, where StarCraft 2 is more strategic, more about decisions, and Brood War is more about athleticism. It's more about choosing where you put your time at a particular point in time. And of course, there's tons of overlap. They're very similar games. You have attention as a resource in both games. But just as far as magnitude goes, the magnitude was higher on the athleticism side, or just the sheer ability to handle stupid amounts of tasks, right? And all those limitations that come with Brood War. And then StarCraft 2, which has this opportunity to be a much more accessible way to enjoy RTS. So the fact that they've moved on to doing it this way, they've basically reverted back to the one big design patch a year, little, this kind of loop. That's very exciting, because I think for all of the people that enjoy the game that stays exactly the same, you can play Brood War now. There's matchmaking now. There's HD graphics. You can just load it up with the launcher. You don't have to get third-party programs. You can check your APM. Just stuff like that. Just a lot of the really basic functionality that Brood War was missing is now here. So if you want a game like Super Smash Bros., an esport kind of like that just kind of pretty much stays the same, and it's more about the athleticism, Brood Wars for you. But StarCraft 2 can be this game that's exciting, that has unit removals, unit additions, redesigns, changes, reworks. It can be this fluid, living thing that changes and keeps the interest. Because I think that the majority of people seem to like games that change a lot. You look at the rise of MOBAs. I think a big part of that was this. There's a new hero. There's changes happening all the time. So it's exciting and interesting. And when you have these two different types of games, like a League of Legends or like a Brood War or a Smash Brothers, they have these sort of two sides to them, where one is really cool because you just grind it and it becomes figured out, and then meta shifts happen like years afterwards, even though no patches have changed at all. The maps kind of balance things a little bit. But then you have this fast changing, give me the attention. And the fast changing, give me the attention, look at all these flashy changes and new things, tends to attract bigger player bases. So the idea that StarCraft 2 can be more of an exciting, more of a changing kind of a product that can get the more casual person invested into RTS, I think is a great direction. And I'm really, really happy that that's the direction they were going with, rather than trying to make two Brood Wars of, different kinds. They're really sort of diverging, I think, here in the path, and making StarCraft 2 a different kind of product that's marketed to a different kind of person. Cross our fingers. We're hoping for the growth of RTS here, right? That's the goal. And just the whole, just as an aside, the whole embracing of Brood War Oh my god. I mean, we haven't had a tea time in a while, so let's talk about tangents are gonna happen. So, oh man, the fact that they're remastering, or they have remastered, excuse me, I was playing it yesterday. Brood War is amazing. The fact that they decided to do it in the way that they did it, also amazing. I was in the room at the community summit where they were like, hey, we were thinking about doing Brood War in the StarCraft 2 engine instead, and, you know, revitalizing Brood War in that way. And everyone in the community summit was just like, no. You can't touch the gameplay. You can't mess with the gameplay at all. Bring the graphics up, bring matchmaking in, do these kinds of things, but don't mess with the game. Don't mess with that original code where all these glitches and all these weird things we've learned over time, they become part of the game. Just like Super Smash Bros. Brood War and Super Smash Bros. As far as esports go, as far as games go, I put them in a very similar category. Just highly competitive games that utilize a bunch of unintended bugs or features, what have you, in their game, so we get this really rich history of both of these games. So I'm so relieved. I'm so relieved that Remastered is going over as well as it is. We're getting some Day 9 content again, which is cool. Getting more Brood War content is great. We're seeing less animosity on the r/StarCraft subreddit between Brood War people and StarCraft 2 people. It's now become, I think, a little bit more fluid, a little bit more like, yeah, I like Brood War and I like StarCraft 2. You can like two games. This idea in the StarCraft community that we can like more than one game, that it's happening, is great. I think that there's a lot of positivity going around, and hopefully we can keep that up. But in any case, we've got Brood War, we've got StarCraft 2. Let's talk about the exciting stuff that's changing now that we've talked to death about the philosophy of Blizzard. It's interesting though, I think, and it's real. It's a thing that's happening. So I haven't read this yet, full disclosure, haven't read this yet, gonna read it, and just give you my first impressions as we go through. Obviously, the big spoiler is Mothership Core is gone, so we're going to see exactly how they implemented that, and maybe give some ideas for ways that it could be better or worse. Have a lot of strong opinions on Defender's Advantage, and a lot of other people in the community are starting to talk about Defender's Advantage a little bit more as well, so let's talk about that probably. All right, here we go. Last year we reached patch 3.8, which, unlike smaller balance patches released throughout the year, was a larger set of changes aimed at improving multiplayer StarCraft 2 through various design changes. This year we are embarking on another design patch. We're excited to share with you our initial list of changes. Okay, so this is not final. That's the important thing to note here. This time around, our general focus is to address underused units and abilities while also trying to reduce sudden game-ending moments. The idea of trying to get things that are underused to be used is sort of interesting. I think the goal of that, to have a game where all the units are viable, that you can use almost all the time, but it's about choosing which one when, a little bit. It's not so hard countery that you can't just say, I want to try to make this different kind of composition work and have a lot of different possibilities for those outcomes. So I think that's cool. Having more units and abilities that are viable to choose from as tools makes the game more fun, more creative. But more importantly, this reduced sudden game ending moments. Is there going to be an Oracle change in here? Is the Oracle going to lower down in lethality? Oh god, I hope so. So lethality is this sudden game-ending moments. Lethality means like how quickly it takes to kill things, how fast battles end. Those are all like lethality. Low hit points, high damage is more lethality. High hit points, low damage is less lethality. If you don't have enough lethality, you get the Heroes of the Storm syndrome, where even if you catch someone out of position, it's really hard to kill them, and you feel like you weren't able, as the player defending, basically, to punish someone who overextends. Which I think has been fixed recently. I've been playing a little bit more Heroes recently. I think it's better than it used to be, but lethality in Heroes used to be super, super low. So low, the lethality was so low that it was frustrating to play. And the other end, high lethality, when all of a sudden you look back and your army is gone in a game of StarCraft, that sucks too. So finding the balance between high and low lethality is an important thing in RTS to make it engaging and fun and interesting, in my opinion. So the idea that they're moving potentially to lower the lethality of particular situations a little bit will help reduce frustration for new players, will help make the game more accessible, and will help, you know, us not have to deal with annoying bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit that's sort of like, okay, I respect you as a player, you're incredibly skilled with these blink stalkers, you out-microed me, you out-macroed me, you know, those types of things. That's cool. But the experience, even though it may be just as skilled, the experience of not paying attention for a second, and then you go back to your base and all of the workers are gone because of an oracle, is awful. It's a terrible experience, especially for new players, and a lot of those kinds of experience, these sudden game-ending moments that they're talking about, are exit points for new and more casual players. Casual has a really bad connotation to it. To be honest, we ought to be calling casual players normal players, because those are actually the players that create the majority of the player base, and those are the people that, you know, supply the big spectator base for all of our events. So I think, you know, maybe moving towards that terminology, or in the very least, just sort of respecting the experience of normal/casual players a little bit more will be really helpful. Getting rid of this animosity toward new players and you know, get good, that kind of stuff. It's funny, it's memes and everything, but it's overall kind of, it just hurts us, right? It's, you know, it's self-damaging. There's like a psychological term, self-destructive. Not that it's purely psychological in any case. This is what happens. I get rambly. We're not doing edits. We're moving on. As of last year, this design patch required large amounts of testing. Hope so. Feedback and revision before it can go live for everyone to enjoy. Please remove the mothership core fully. Please. Okay. We wanted to get into your hands for testing as fast as possible. The changes in this blog will be live soon in the testing section of StarCraft multiplayer, which has matchmaking, thank God. And we would like to release found changes after year's tournament season. Yep, that's the cycle. That's the correct cycle, in my opinion. That's the best possible cycle for StarCraft at this point. Outline pros changes, give some more thoughts to explain what we're trying to accomplish. Cool. So, I'm not going to be talking too much about balance. I am going to be talking a lot about design and about philosophy and where this game is going, with the idea that the big win here is this design change increases the player base. That's really the biggest win that we can hope for, I think. Having a bigger player base would be great for StarCraft 2, and really opening people's eyes up to the idea that you can play an RTS and have a good time and not play at 200, 100 APM. Like, you can have a good old 50 APM time, having a good time in Bronze League or whatever league, and still enjoy yourself and not get too frustrated, things like that. Maybe it's a pipe dream, we'll see. Economy. Now this is crazy. I already saw the word economy and it freaked me out. Are they really? This is really cool. Like, they're opening up the door to talk about economy again? I thought for sure, like, okay, they have their new economy. We fought them super hard to try and get the economy we wanted, the community. They said no, and we're stuck with it. And that's a bummer. I don't think any sort of different harvesting patterns or diminishing return patterns are going to change, but, you know, probably just some mineral changes as I've perused ahead a little bit. In Legacy of the Void, we changed the amount of resources in each base, promote expanding, discourage overly defensive playstyles. While this did have intended results, we think there might be a way to make comebacks easier when players are denied a third or fourth base. Cool. So comeback potential, really important to have an enjoyable esport for those comeback moments, and also have an enjoyable game. So that way you're playing the game, you're having a good time. I did a whole thing on comeback potential in Vanguard. It's a video, I think it's a couple videos old. You can check it out if you're interested in that sort of a thing. To do this, here we go, implementation. We'd like to increase the amount of gas on Vespene gas geysers, as well as large mineral nodes. This means that bases take longer to completely run out, but since it's only the large mineral node being adjusted, players are still encouraged to take new bases to increase their mineral income rate. This should also decrease some of the pressure on new players to secure new bases right away. I definitely like this. This is something that we have in Vanguard already, which is the main base. Wait a minute. No. Oh, excuse me. No. No, this is not just the main base. Okay. This is something different. This is every base. Every base lasts longer. Huh. So you can get more economy by expanding faster, but your bases last longer, so there's less attrition. One of the biggest problems that I did have with the economy system as it was initially implemented, instead of the different mods that were going around, the community was trying to get going on, changing the curve of the worker and its efficiency rate, etc. There were so many versions of that. Double harvesting was one of them. There were many. But in any case, the idea that forcing players to expand rather than encouraging players to expand. Forcing players to expand creates a really big stress point for new players, like they're pointing out. But giving players incentive to expand and saying, "Here, you're good. You can hang out for a bit. That's fine. But if you get more bases, you're going to get a lot bigger of an advantage, right?" And I think a lot of the reason why we don't see that is the sort of soft 3-base cap that you see in most StarCraft games. 3 bases is usually the economy, sometimes up to 4, pretty much no more than that. Compared to like the Brood War economy, where you can just keep getting more and more and more and more bases. I'm not saying that they're compatible and you just copy paste one over to the other, but just, you know, those are the sort of different ways to apply it. Let's see. Right, so yeah, I'm in line with that. I'm not sure if what they're doing is going to have the goal, going to have the outcome they're trying to accomplish, but the fact that they're trying to accomplish that goal and they're articulating here they understand and they're thinking about the emotional experience of the new player is huge. There's not a lot of talk, there hasn't been in the past, a lot of talk about the new player and the emotional, specifically the emotional experience of the new player and why that's important. Because that's how you get a bigger player base, right? That's normal players playing the game with a game that's set up in a way that's psychologically rewarding to them and doesn't hurt them in a negative way. Stresses can be good, but too many stresses and the wrong kinds of stresses can be exit points for players. And that just means it's a point where the player's like, you know what, I'm done with this shit. Which can happen really, really early in StarCraft. I think actually most exit points in StarCraft 2 and Brood War, while we're talking about it, are very early on. Whereas other games will be like easy to get into, but then the depth isn't there, and so people just sort of don't stick with it. StarCraft, I don't think, has that problem. I think once you get to a certain point in StarCraft, it just becomes beautiful and amazing, and you can see all the fantasticness of that the RTS genre has to offer, basically. But it takes a while to get to that point, and so that's why a lot of my work in the past with Tutorial Central or these various things have been trying to sort of fill that gap. So to hear Blizzard talking about this stuff and actually addressing it, or, you know, making moves to say, this is a problem, and we're gonna try this out, and we're gonna try to address it to make the game less stressful for new players. That's awesome. And by the way, just because the game becomes less stressful for new players doesn't mean the game loses anything on the high end. I think that there's this paranoia about the skill ceiling might fall. The skill ceiling is like way up there, all right? And this is the achievable human ability, okay? And the skill ceiling's way up there. If it comes down a little tiny bit, you're not gonna know. You're not gonna have any fucking clue. Nobody's gonna be able to play perfect StarCraft. It's okay. Ooh, I see the mech word. Ooh, I see the mech word. Okay, here we go. Last year, Terran had a major update to its mech arsenal. This year, we're going to look into adjusting mules to better synergize with Terran mech. That's an interesting approach. Giving them a bit more flexibility in general. Want to take a look at Terran caster units, see where they can make changes to have them become more useful in the early game or in small numbers. In general, we also wanted to improve some underused options and reduce sudden game ending tactics. Oh, I see a theme. Oh, I see a theme. I see a theme, and it's a theme I've been harping on and praying for and hoping for a long time. Flash be praised. They're talking about, oh my god, they're finally talking about it. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. This is such a good day. Reduce sudden game ending tactics. When the game ends suddenly, it's not as fun. The game ends after a long period of increased advantage, and you know what I'm talking about. I already harped on this for a while. I picked that one up from Travis, December's Calm. I almost never used the word heart before, and I just realized I used it twice in like 4 or 5 sentences. Thanks, Travis. The mule. Okay, so let's see how let's see implementation. Oh, I love this. I love this. I love this. While the mule admiral performs its current job as a mineral collector. I don't know. That's funny for me because the mule's kind of cute, you know? The mule's this little buddy, you know, he's just kind of hanging out and doing his job, admirably performing his current job. That's adorable. Props to whoever did the writing for this this write-up. It's been very nice. We wanted to experiment with a version that's more flexible for Terran commanders. Mules will now be able to mine Vespene gas. Oh man. That's huge. Wow. Oh gosh. Oh, I can't even keep reading. That's incredible. I don't know if it'll work or not, but that's incredible. The fact that Blizzard is willing to make that big of a change and try it out, incredible. The one thing I'm starting to worry about though, because whenever I get happy, I get worried. And it's a good self-defense mechanism if you need to stay alive and keep doing shit. So, how much of this shit is actually going to make it in? That's starting to show up as a pattern a bit. Like, we're gonna test this, we're gonna try this. The last community summit I went to, they said we tried killing the mothership core and it didn't work, so we're not gonna try it. So I don't know if this is just another like, yeah, we're gonna kill the mothership core, and then we're just gonna revert it at the end, and this is just lip service. I'm getting a little bit worried. If this is not just lip service, and many of these changes do make it in, I think we have a wonderful future. But of course, I'm gonna disagree with some of them. You're gonna disagree with some of them, probably, because we're all different humans. So, and that's sort of the way it is, and that's totally okay. That's totally okay. Okay, mules can mine Vespene gas. One of the things that I really like about this already is the idea that muling has always been a very rote task. A task that you just do every certain number of seconds, and it's always exactly the same. There's pretty much no decision in it. There's this tiny little decision of, I've scouted they're going Twilight, and they got their gases quite early. I need to make sure I save for scans. Aside from that, which is like a really small kind of a scenario, saving energy, right? Is a more rare kind of scenario. This adds another layer of decision making onto the mule. And so the idea of removing macro mechanics was always very palatable to me. It was very, you know, I sort of, let's try that out. That looks quite nice. But doing this is interesting because it's sort of approaching the problem of macro mechanics from a different angle. Instead of saying macro mechanics are rote and boring for most people, there's not really much decision making in them, let's remove them. It's, okay, we recognize these same things. Instead, let's give some more meaning and more decision making to those mechanics so that they become a more integral part of the decision making process of the strategic game, etc. Which again, if they're moving StarCraft 2 to be even more of a strategic game that's about making decisions and holding on to Brood War being this athletic, it's hard to be a commander, as Day9 puts it, kind of a game, then this could be potentially a really cool way to deal with the boringness of dropping mules. Because now you choose between minerals or gas. And it also, whoa, on top of that, it also is another little like noob mechanic because, oh man, I really need gas, drop mules in the gas. Oh man, I need some more minerals, drop noobs on them, dropping the noobs on the minerals. Random hot dog, if you're watching, please beam that. But in any case, the idea that you can choose is really cool. It makes it easier for new Terran players to balance their minerals and gas because they can just drop the mules on whatever they need more at the time, which is kind of neat. It also brings into play the dropping of supply, the dropping of the supply depot, which is a nice little accessibility mechanic for new Terran players as well. So we're starting to see a lot of strength in the accessibility area for Terran starting to sort of get build up together. I mean, dropping supply is kind of a noob trap, but it's a nice little hold you over until shit gets real kind of a mechanic, which is why I'm sort of okay with it. I wouldn't plan to make that like in Vanguard or Immortal intentionally, but as an outsider that it's there has, you know, a certain effect on accessibility, which is nice. Okay, we can move on now. Whew, man, this is crazy. This is big stuff. This is so much big stuff. But lose efficiency if more than one mule is assigned per refinery. In exchange, the mule's mineral mining rate has been reduced slightly. Okay, so they're messing with the power budget of the mule away from minerals and toward gas, so that way it can do both. They harvest 10 Vespene per trip and 20 minerals per trip instead of 25. So what is it? 9 trips? I think it was 9 trips of 25 brought us to 225 minerals. That is correct. So then 9 trips of 20 minerals brings it down to 180 minerals. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. And the rate of mining for gas and minerals is a little bit different. So we can't do a direct comparison without serious maths that I can't do in my head. So we'll move on for the time being. That's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be cool to check out. All right, the Raven. Was gonna make a joke, not gonna make that joke. We are exploring a redesign of the Raven's abilities to turn it into a more supportive caster role. Auto turret and point defense drone are being holy wow. Wow. Well, we're gonna have almost a completely new unit. Auto turret and points defense drone are gone. They were clunky. I'm kind of okay with them going away. The Seeker missile being redesigned. Interesting. Our goal here is to address feedback that Ravens are only somewhat useful when made in small numbers and become oppressive if massed. Okay. Players should now want to make a few Ravens during a game and not have an incentive to heavily mass produce Ravens. Okay, so if you take away the ability to make a whole army of auto turrets and point defense drones, then maybe it's less massable. Seems reasonable. And like taking away things that create temporary units is pretty much always going to make me happy as far as StarCraft 2 is concerned. I would really like temporary units to just pretty much not exist. There are a couple applications where I think they're cool and interesting, but for the most part, I haven't really seen any in StarCraft 2 that I'm like, oh, that's a really cool use of a temporary unit, except maybe Hallucination. I like Hallucination a lot. It's cool. There's a slight bit of mind games. It's mostly scouting, so it has this dependable, useful thing to it, which is nice. But other than that, yeah, temporary units, not a huge fan. Let's see what they're going to do. Oh, removal of existing ability. Okay, so they're not even calling it a Seeker missile anymore. Hopefully they give it a new model, because otherwise it's going to be pretty tricky. Pretty tricky for people to get used to that name change. If not, people will get used to it anyway, but a model change would be nice. Let's see. Scrambler Missile is an anti-mech unit ability. So this is going to take away a little bit from the versatility, unless the other one is anti-bio, right? Because pretty much everything is either mechanical or biological. Anyway, temporary disables all weapons and unit abilities. But only for mechanical units. Okay, this is complex. This ability is effective against important enemy units to help swing a battle in your favor, even if you are down in supply. Since it disables abilities, this can also be used against medevacs and warp prisms to prevent loading or unloading of units. Wow. Cutting off retreats or incursions into your base. So I guess if it was an anti-mech, it would be too strong, right? Maybe that's the basic idea. Like, cutting all weapons. Wow. Cutting all weapons and unit abilities. Like, silencing cutting unit abilities is one thing. But, like, silence plus you can't do anything? You can't attack. It's gonna be tough to tell without actually playing with this, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of counterplay with the Scrambler missile. This kind of shuts down the opponent's ability to do anything. It's a Scrambler missile. It's like, so not a huge fan at the start. Target mechanical units, weapons, and abilities are disabled for a short. Ooh, wow. So much is said with so little. The word target here is gigantic. The fact that this can only target one unit or weapon, I think that kind of opens up the power budget. I don't think it has to be anti-mech. I don't know. I was assuming AoE. I'm so used to AoE skill shots because that's pretty much what we use for Vanguard on everything. Just because it has that initial element of counterplay. You can also target ground, you can do zoning. Like, once you get into, like, the all skill shot area of RTS, going back to point and click abilities is... they have their advantages, you know. It's not my favorite. Also definitely not used to it, so... Okay. So it takes out, it's 50 energy, and it basically takes a unit out of the fight for an undisclosed amount of time. Repair drone, deployable unit that is unable to move, but has repair beam that restores the health of nearby friendly mech units. Mech and anti-mech. The repair drone will give Terran mech commanders a new way to keep their units up and running. Timed life repair drone. Drone can target and repair mechanical units inside that area. Okay. So instead of having to take SCVs along for the ride and do the repair with the SCVs, you now have an ability that'll do it. It's weird though, because it's already so expensive. It's already so gas expensive. Maybe with the new mule, mixing in Ravens to a mech army will be a little bit easier. Like, I understand, like, the idea of them working together, but it's... I feel maybe tricky to get to. I might be a little bit out of my depth there. Probably should ask Ketrock or some similar mech human about how this affects things. But interesting. We're gonna get some more sustainability with the mech armies. The fact that, wait a minute. Oh, this might be I'm pretty sure this is gonna be an in-combat heal. Huh. Yeah, there's no mention of the heal being out of combat, so that means you just throw your pair drones down, your bunch of, like, sieged mech, and it's just, like, you're not getting in there. Also, you could have, you could now have a Hellbat getting repaired by a repair drone, SCVs. And actually, I'm just realizing that this is all kinds of messed up, and I need to change it. Ah! Is it gone now? That pixel is gonna bug me. Ah! For all of you who have been bugged by that pixel the whole time, it's fixed now. It's fixed, we're fine. We're doing it live. Yeah, so it can be repaired by... it can be healed by a medevac while being repaired by a repair drone while being repaired by SCVs. I don't know if there's some weird thing that you can do to make cool strats happen, but like repair drone Hellbats in mineral lines against Zerg, as the Zerg rushes to attack with queens who have no DPS and lings who just melt. Not that you can get to a Raven quickly enough, but I don't know. I start seeing funny little things. And that's part of the cool part about a big mix-up like this is we get to enter into that birth of strategy era again, where it's just sort of like, shit's weird. What are we gonna do? I don't know. I don't know. What do you want to, you know? And we can just figure out cool shit to do, which is a lot of fun. At least for me. I really enjoy that part of the game. And the Shredder missile. So it's similar to the Seeker missile, but on impact, it works differently. Instead of doing 100 splash damage, it now does 30, but also decrease. Whoa! Armor debuffs. We are really getting into the complexity of things. Interesting. Armor debuffs. Is this the first armor debuff in multiplayer StarCraft 2? I think is this the first silence? Not the Shredder missile, the other thing. Huh. Instead of doing 100 splash damage, -3 armor. It's intended to stack less efficiently with itself than the old Seeker missile, but with more of a combo ability used with core units such as Marine Cyclones or Vikings. Okay, cool. So by giving it an armor debuff and not as much straight up damage, I think this is a pretty clear cut. This should happen the way it's being intended to happen. You won't want to multi-shredder missile an area like crazy, especially if it's 125 energy. You're gonna want to throw that in there like an EMP, right? On Protoss, you kind of blanket the army with EMPs and then, going to finish the job. So a similar kind of idea, I think, going on here, which is pretty neat. Short delay, pursues a target, 30 damage, reduce armor. Oh, we got rid of a useless upgrade. We replaced it with a new upgrade, maybe not useless. Or wait, have people explosive upgrade? Man, I do not build Ravens. I really don't. Increases the blast radius of Shredder missile by 20% and its tracking range by 50. Ah, okay. Blast radius is great because the armor debuff is amazing. That's like phenomenal. That's going to swing the tide of battle in a serious way, especially late game, which is when the Raven's going to be used mostly. Tracking range by 50% as well, so more reliable connections, which is pretty neat. Wait, so this heals. The Shredder missile still does some damage. And this is a disable. Cool. So goodbye Raven as a harass unit. That's great. That's phenomenal. The Raven as a harass unit was always a cool idea in the current game state, but it's like undesirable. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Sort of like, oh, here's a super high-tech caster unit. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna send it all by itself to the enemy mineral line. It's like, oh wow, that's a really high risk for all that gas. Yeah, but it's got this auto turret that shreds stuff up, It's sort of like this weird scenario where the Raven was in a spot where I don't think it was intended to be, and this should move it back towards a support caster. So, yeah, this looks like it's gonna work. That's pretty cool. That's more of just I think a solid change. Nothing too crazy going on there, but should help. And you get rid of all the annoying delay of game stuff that auto turret and point defense drones can do. So, not delaying the game forever. Awesome. Ending all of a sudden, you're not looking and your army gets wiped. Also awesome. Should help with all of that. In an effort to reduce certain game-ending moments. Oh man, they keep saying the same magic words. They're getting me excited. We want to try making Widow Mines easier to clean up. They will now be revealed when their weapon is reloading, even if they are still burrowed. This should make cleaning up unintended Widow Mines much easier while still allowing the Widow Mine to perform its splash damage roll if properly set up with a Terran army or used defensively. Interesting. They don't want it to be used offensively, perhaps. Why would they? They're specifically saying defensively here. I could be reading too much into this. That's fair. I really like this. This is a nice little shift. The Widow Mine, running your widow mine into stuff is running stuff into widow mines is one of the most awful things ever. Oh wait, this is not gonna help that at all. Your flock of mutas will still die. Sorry. But the fact that they're gonna be revealed, I think is a step in the right direction. I've always been annoyed with the widow mine. I've never had an experience with a widow mine where I was like, oh, that was really cool. It's always just like, oh, that happened. Crap. So we'll see. It's moving in I think, the direction I'd like it to move in the very least. All right, the Ghost. The elusive and deadly Ghost. Oh, getting a little flavor in there. It's already a strong late game tech choice for Terran compositions I already want to try out. Having the Ghost's key defensive ability Cloak come online faster. Come online. Ooh. Ooh. Someone watches their Dota 2. Come online faster while balancing this out by breaking out the Mobius reactor upgrade. Man, watching the international, the words "come online" may have been one of the favorite phrases ever. I did not realize how popular it was. Breaking out of the Mobius reactor upgrade, putting it back on the Ghost Academy. It's intended to help players transition to Ghost more safely in the mid to late game and possibly make Ghost as an unusual but strategic opening for Terran players. Cloak by default. Wow. That's definitely gonna make it come online faster. So Ghosts aren't really that limited tech-wise. They're limited cost-wise for the most part. The idea that you can start out making ghosts that have Cloak while walking across the map and getting a nuclear missile is pretty exciting. I don't think it's going to happen in pro games, but it's pretty exciting. Also, ghosts are pretty good at shredding light targets. Like, making the Ghost, I think come online faster. In general, like Cloak will come online faster, obviously, but I think the Ghost as an idea to be able to mix into a composition earlier on is really cool. Really neat. Big fan. It's sort of like when they got rid of the siege mode upgrade for a siege tank. I was just so happy, right? Because that's what the siege tank is. It's not really much of anything if it doesn't siege. Like, its primary identity is in its siegingness. And so having that by default is cool. I don't know if the primary identity of a Ghost would be that it cloaks, but it's pretty up there. It's called a ghost, all right? An invisible spirit, or sometimes visible to those with the third eye and such. Or whatever kind of an eye you need to see a ghost. Perhaps some sort of technology. But the point is, this brings the Ghost into the fold sooner, hopefully. And the 50 to 75 energy is kind of like, meh. It's not huge. EMP, I think, is 75, though. God, man, I've been playing a lot of Vanguard. Okay. The Liberator is getting minor design change to its vision when deployed. Instead of getting a flat vision increase to allow it to fire into its targeting circle, it will instead get extra vision within the targeting circle. This lets the Liberator still fire unsupported. It makes it easier for opponents to sneak around its vision or to attack from alternate angles. I had no idea. Huh. Well, that sounds great. That sounds phenomenal. This is called counterplay. We like counterplay. Big fan of counterplay. More counterplay options to deal with Liberators. Liberators very annoying. Having counterplay to things that are annoying are, that's the beginnings of what makes an annoying unit. Just a regular unit that you enjoy playing against and having the dance, the battle, right? Cool. Want Cyclone's lock-on ability to feel a bit more impactful than it does currently. Well, it definitely doesn't feel impactful, so good on you there. So then we were making it so the first 4 shots will fire rapidly to help increase the guaranteed damage the Cyclone can deal with its targets. Man, this is some complex shit. That's very specific. I'm really, a lot of the stuff, they're really ratcheting up the complexity in a lot of different fields here, in small ways, but in a lot of different units and abilities. So I wonder if the overall effect of that is positive or negative. It'll be interesting. It's hard to get good data because the StarCraft playing population is so highly skilled compared to the gaming population of, say, a game like League of Legends or Dota. More like League of Legends, right? Hearthstone. Games that more people will play, and more people will play in a normal way rather than a competitive way. It'll be interesting to see. This particular bit of complexity is pretty intuitive. You'll see the 4 shots fire out rapidly. You don't really need to hover on a tooltip to know that that happened. So I think this particular example is not going to cause any problems at all. Might even be really, really good. Upgrade to increase damage to armored targets. Okay, so opening up long-term anti-air capabilities for the Cyclone is cool. Its anti-air just got nerfed into the ground last time, so the idea that it's going to come back and do things is interesting. The anti-ground attack is still really strong, though, so I wonder, I mean, this feels like a lot of Cyclones will get made. Cyclone, I think, becomes more of a core unit. It can shoot up and down. It can move around. You know, and those are the critical things for sort of a generalist unit. So maybe it becomes like a kind of generalist mech unit instead of the Thor, you know, being like this. Oh, I can shoot up and down and I do pretty well, but I'm slow. Doing with the Cyclone, the battle mech style, maybe becoming more powerful. Smart servos. Ooh. Interesting. Everything's going to transform faster. Oh, no, not everything. Just the... Ooh. So the units that get used a little more tactically, as far as their transforms, I shouldn't say tactically, but more mobile, right? Hellion, Hellbat, Thor, Viking transforms get upgraded, but they leave the siege units alone. Having different transform times for those units, I think, makes a lot of sense. And that's really cool. So a lot of, overall, we'll just do an overall Terran thing, so I don't want to go back. Overall, a lot of cool stuff. The economy change we already kind of talked about. The mule change, I think, is the biggest change here. That's pretty crazy. The direction of the Raven seems really good. The Widow Mine is not as much as I had hoped for, but maybe it starts working its way into the counterplay area. Ghosts showing up sooner in games would be really neat. I love the Ghost. It's a cool unit. It's a lot of fun. I would love to see it in pro matches more often. And then the Liberator is a cool change. Cyclone, and then Smart Servos. Cool. A lot of stuff. The Mule, though. Whew. The Mule is my highlight for that one. Oh man, it's Protoss time. It's Protoss time. I'm actually out of drink of most varieties because this is a huge patch. It's gonna be a long video. I hope you're having a good time. Make sure you go ahead and pause the video when you wanna refill your tea, etc. Smoothing out control of certain units within the Protoss arsenal. Okay, so that's gonna address the problem of Protoss feeling like high-tech space wizards rather than sort of stalwart warriors of doom and destruction and super powerfulness of the old zealot. Oh, the Brood War zealot. Okay, sorry. We're gonna get back into it. Especially in regards to their core splash damage options, High Templar, Colossus, and Disruptor. We also want to take a look at the early game defenses of Protoss, especially the ubiquitous Mothership Core. And seeing if we could make these defenses revolve more around the basic Protoss early game units, since these changes are quite large, to be keeping a close eye on how they all work out. Now, we're going to talk about, before we get into this, we're going to talk about power budget, right? So if a unit costs 50 minerals, Marine, it has a certain budget of 50 minerals of power that it has to have. If it has more than 50 minerals worth of power, the more that happens, the more it becomes OP, right? That's what the actual OP-ness is, right? When something is over its power budget, or underpowered when it's under its power budget. So with that in mind, all of the gateway units have a power budget equal to their cost, whatever that cost might be. But part of that power budget is getting eaten up right now by Defender's Advantage. So because warp prisms can warp in units super quick, you can't make the gateway units too strong, because then with their ability to cut into Defender's Advantage, that would be an extra bit of power on top of their normal power budget for whatever their cost is, and that would be OP, right? That would be too strong. So this piece of cutting into Defender's Advantage instead removes this part of the power budget of the unit, and then this is left, right? That bottom part is left for the unit's stats, its attack, its starting armor, its scaling with upgrades, its specific upgrades, the power of those, the cost of those, etc. Right? They're all kind of coming together in that way. So because that's the case, it's really difficult to make gateway units stronger. It's also difficult because they're core units. They show up throughout the entire game. It's a very, very fine balance when you're giving a buff to something like the Zealot, right? That's really crazy stuff. It can have really scary late game ramifications. And it's a really big buff because it's a core unit, mineral dump unit, etc. So keeping that all in mind, what's necessary for the power budget to get freed up is for the warp prism to warp in slowly, just like the pylons that are out there that warp in slowly unless they have a nexus or a gateway. And once that happens, the ability for Protoss to cut into their opponent's Defender's Advantage is completely gone. It used to be really, really forceful and pretty much free by dropping pylons around the map wherever you wanted. Now it's harder, and a final step to finally open up that space fully for the power budget of all of the gateway units is for the warp prism to have a slower warp in time. And that's very much connected with the mothership core. The reason why the mothership core exists is to create Defender's Advantage in the PvP matchup, more so than anything else. But again, on the defensive side, you have this mothership core that centralizes all the defensive power, and the warp prism that centralizes all of the offensive power. And those things, because they exist in their powerful states, again, they're taking away from the power budget, the options, that design space that you have to improve the basic gateway units. So, in conclusion, you can get rid of the mothership core and help gateway units out, but there's only so much buffing you can do to gateway units while the warp prism still has the fast warp in, because you have to respect that ability to cut into Defender's Advantage, because if you don't and you just buff the gateway units without removing the warp prism fast warp in time, then you just get warp prism all-ins only, and that's all there is, because that's what makes all your gateway units overpowered, because you're using that bit of the power budget on top by being able to cut into Defender's Advantage. So that system in place, that triangle of of these different elements that sort of affect each other. We have the gateway strength, we've got the warp prism, we've got the mothership core. They're all integral parts of this triangle, and you can't just say, we'll just change one of these things without making the requisite changes to the other things. So that aside, I haven't read this yet. Let's see what the implementation is. And perhaps the most experimental and risky change of this update, we're trying out removing the mothership core and moving its early game defense role to the Nexus itself. Okay, so you're taking some of the power of the mothership core. Instead of giving it to gateway units, we're going to give it, at least in part, to the Nexus. And the Nexus is great because you can build as many Nexuses as you want. So the idea that the Nexus is going to have its own defensive power is really nice. It's going to disperse the power that had to originally be in one hero unit that moves around to multiple different places. And the dispersal of power, I think, is good in an RTS. Makes the RTS more scrappy, more action-packed, more multiple location type stuff. And that's the big advantage, I think. One of the many big advantages RTS has over MOBAs is that there's a lot of action going on. There's a lot to keep your attention. And there's less of this, everything is happening right here. It's the team fight. Here we go, the team fight. The teams are fighting all together. And I understand, you know, there's magnitude in everything, right? That kind of element happens in StarCraft, happens in MOBAs, but it's about how much it happens and the magnitude, right, of that happening. And it happens, I think it can happen a lot more in RTS, this idea of spreading the game out across the map. Can happen a little bit more powerfully and a little more interestingly, I think, in RTS. That aside, in doing this change, we hope to somewhat simplify Protoss early game defenses. By concentrating defensive power in the Nexus itself rather than a specialized unit that moves between them. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of the word simplify there, but I get what they're saying and I agree with it. I just... Okay, alright. Shield restore. Okay. Change your Chrono Boost to behave more like it did during the heart of the swarm, where it costs energy to cast and last a fixed duration. All right, so we're getting another change in the macro mechanics. I wonder if Zerg will get a change in their macro mechanics. Maybe a fourth larva finally. Can we get our fourth larva back, please? And adjust other things? We need larva, us Zergs, we need it. For the game to be Zergy, sufficiently swarmy, we need enough larva. All right, that said, macro boost is overall similar to how the currently functions Legacy of the Void. By removing the macro ability back to being energy cost, there will be interesting decisions to make between spending Nexus energy on macro or boosting defenses. Energy tension, right? The idea that you have multiple spells and 1 bar of energy and you have to choose which spell to cast. That's interesting. That's a decision. I actually didn't really have too much of a problem. I was a big proponent of removing macro mechanics from StarCraft 2 when that discussion was happening. But I'm a really big fan of Chrono Boost the way it used to be implemented. That coming back is great because it was already a decision. Where are you going to spend this energy? On what will you spend it? Whereas Inject is just like, you just do this. Every 36 seconds, you just do it. You just do it and then you're better. And if you don't do it, then you're worse. And that's the way it is. That's more of an athletic Brood War kind of a thing. Whereas I kind of like this more strategic direction that StarCraft 2 has taken. And moving that direction, it sort of makes me happy. You know, I like it. I hope it happens more. We'll see. By moving the macro ability back to being energy, we have energy tension. It's going to cost 50 energy, 10 seconds, boost to buildings work rate by 100%. Cool. I think those are pretty much the old stats. I don't remember them exactly. All right, recall, bring back units in a target location to the Nexus that casts the ability. Okay, so this is basically Starbow. Thank you, Starbow, for creating things that StarCraft 2 uses. This Nexus change is basically, if you haven't played Starbow, go play it. It's an awesome game. It's basically a Starbow Nexus, more or less, which is cool. I'm a big fan of that. So, but yeah, mass recall works that way, which is cool. It's a retreating recall. Make the choice between being more active on the map with their units. Yeah, that's an interesting effect. Yeah, if you can recall and you don't have to have the mothership core with you, and it's a defensive recall, that means you can afford to be really aggressive. That's very powerful. That is a lot of power. It costs 100 energy, so half of the energy bar, but still. That is a lot of power. That may allow Protoss to actually be aggressive and be out on the map earlier, which is nice. Retreatability is a huge thing. If you can inject more retreatability into an RTS, all of a sudden players are going to start getting out on the map and skirmishing a lot more, seeing what advantages they can gain, because it's actually advantageous for them to go out on the map and interact with their opponent if they believe they have a micro advantage, an advantage in control in micro, right? We don't want it to result in super safe army movements, so when units are being recalled, they'll be unable to attack or move while the build is being channeled before they're called back to the Nexus. 4 seconds, all units in target area are teleported. Units are unable to move or attack during this time. Okay, cool. So you can be aggressive, but it doesn't mean you get a free ticket out no matter what. Your opponent has 4 seconds to wail on you, so that creates counterplay skill back and forth between two players about predicting army movement, about putting individual units further out from the main clump to get a scout off, so that way you have time to recall if you need to. This, I think, was going to create a lot more activity, early game activity for Protoss players, which would be great. That's cool. I'm a big fan. 100 energy is a lot, but maybe it'll be worth it. And now that we're really starting to see a decision in the Nexus between, okay, very interesting. Do we spend the energy this way? Do we spend it on macro? Do we spend it on being able to be aggressive? That's interesting. That's decision making. That's really where I think StarCraft 2 has its strength. And so leaning into that is really excellent. Replacing Photon Overcharge, we're trying out Shield Recharge mechanic, which allow Protoss players to use more of their combat units for defense. Currently, the ability works on both buildings and units. Oh god. Finish reading JaKaTaK, god. On both buildings and units. I was like, which two buildings? I thought we were just talking about the Nexus. So that players can decide if they want to keep important structures alive during all-ins or heavy harass. 1 energy per 3 shield restored. Autocast functionality can be cast on units or structures. Oh! So this is like a beam. This is like the medic's heal beam, but it'll be on the Nexus. Oh, this is so cool. I'm gonna be playing StarCraft Remastered and the new testing version of StarCraft 2. Whew, and Vanguard? The RTS dream is alive. Okay. Very cool. I wonder, the autocast functionality is going to be interesting, because what is it going to prioritize and why? How is it just going to sort of borrow from unit targeting priority? Is there a priority system in the medic, in the campaign? It doesn't heal buildings. This will be the first thing that also heals buildings. So I'm imagining some potential issues here with creating the correct priority for the autocast. Hopefully that gets sorted out before it hits the testing floor. But if it doesn't, that'll be a cool opportunity for us to look into it and see, okay, what's the ideal hierarchy for, autocast functionality for something like this? How can we design that? And, sort of think about our ideas and share them with Blizzard to make a better RTS, which is the goal. Make RTS great again, y'all. RTS is great. It doesn't need to be again. It just needs to be more great. Can be cast on units or structures, autocast functionality, additional changes. And from a marketing presentation standpoint, it's kind of neat how they were just like, unit removal. This isn't really all about unit removal. Additional changes is just like, meh. But it's kind of cool. They're like, this is the important stuff. If you only read the important stuff, Mothership Core is gone. Same thing with the Mule, right? They put that right at the top. They were just like, hey, if you're only going to read the beginning of Terran, by the way, the Mule, that's the big deal. So they seem to be... And then additional changes. This is the stuff that's small. They don't think people are going to care about too much, probably. I really like how they're structuring this, this post, and the writing is really good as well. I like that they're throwing a little bit of flavory language in there sometimes to keep our interest. Appreciate it. The Admirable Mule. With removal Mothership Core, we're also looking into Protoss other early game units. In particular, we want to try sharpening the role of the Stalker. Sharpening sounds scary. Don't get yourself cut because you are sharpening the Stalker. Make it more of a shoot and move unit with sniping capabilities. Making the Stalker more of a general unit. What, are you gonna remove Blink? Slow its attack rate, increase its damage per shot. Okay, so you increase the ability for, or the value of kiting because more damage is done per shot and the attack rate's down. I imagine they're keeping the DPS the same. It sounds like this is like an equilibrium kind of a thing rather than a strengthening the Stalker kind of a thing. 1014 to 1521, that's significant. And 50% slower. Okay, yeah. Interesting, okay. So very similar DPS, but it now gets +2 damage per upgrade instead of +1. One of the interesting things that I'd like to look at, and I will be looking at later, is +2 blink was always a big thing. The first professional game of StarCraft 2 ever played in StarCraft 2 Alpha was a +2 blink timing, Protoss versus Zerg, on Lost Temple. That was the first game where professionals were allowed to play StarCraft 2 when it was in Alpha, and that was broadcast to us. It's very hard to track down, but if you can track it down, it's there. It's on Lost Temples. Positions are 12 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And it's a +2 blink timing and it crushes. +2 blink has always been like this really critical, really powerful timing. So I wonder how that is going to change things, especially against Zerg. Where is the critical relationship between Stalkers and Zerglings? How has that changed as a result of these numbers changing? And now the +2 damage per upgrade instead of +1. Does that mean all the +2 timings that were so strong before we now have access to some +1 timings with similar kind of damage or better damage, right? Because we're doubling the damage per upgrade, but the fire rate is only nerfed by 50%. I may be getting into the world where y'all gonna do some math on me and tell me that I'm dumb. So we're gonna move on for now. But Stalker, definitely want to look at critical upgrades because remember, overkill is important. How many hits it takes to kill something is important. Even if you're reducing the actually probably especially if you're reducing the attack rate. I'm definitely gonna look at the Stalker Zergling relationship and probably the Stalker Hydralisk relationship after this. Cool. While we like how much micro the current disruptor provides, we thought that we could try making it do damage more consistently with slightly less game-ending potential per shot. Oh, the Blink Disruptor wars of old. I haven't watched a pro PvP in a long time, but if they're still happening, that's sad. But that was a sad time. The idea of all of a sudden it was just like, what? Your one disruptor killed all the disruptors in one hit. I guess you're okay. But wait, you have one disruptor. If that one, like, it was a bit much. So making it more consistent, more reliable. I don't like anything that one hits anything for the most part. Like, to me, that's too lethal. Unless you're making it a really big investment to do a one shot on anything. Like, give the person at least 2 shots worth of time, which is, by the way, not a lot of time, to react and mitigate some of the damage, To do this, we're making it so the Purification Nova has a triggering detonation circle in the middle of the shot. So if an enemy unit comes in contact with a Purification Nova, it will detonate immediately. Ooh! Oh! That's cool. That's cool. You can have really intentional counterplay with that, where you take a unit and you move it up into the Nova to offset it early. Huh. That's really interesting. Counterplay. Love counterplay. More counterplay oftentimes is good. Huh. Damage per shot is reduced. See, this is weird. They're saying in exchange, the damage per shot is reduced. Like, this change increases the counterplay for the opponent and makes the Nova shot less powerful. And now they're saying in exchange, we're also going to make it less powerful. I might be reading this wrong, but this feels like a double nerf, not a nerf and a buff. In exchange for the damage per shot is being reduced, but the cooldown, there's so many but in exchanges, God, conjunctions, I don't think this makes sense. The cooldown is reduced as well. Okay, so the damage per shot and the cooldown is the equilibrium, and then the counterplay is a nerf. This allows Purification Nova to hit more consistently against opposing armies, but each shot is less likely to detonate in the center of enemy forces and cripple them. When dropped from a warp prism, there's going to be a delay. We did something similar with the Reaver in Vanguard. It worked out really well for us. Imagine it will work out quite well for the StarCraft 2 folk as well. Let's take a look. Still lasts 2 seconds, detonates on contact. With units, not structures, it's an important thing. Damage reduce much less against shields. That's great. It puts it in the 2-hit area for other disruptors, which is big. I think, anyway. 160. I'm pretty sure this puts it in 2-hit range. I don't remember the exact numbers. Cooldown reduced, so it shoots faster, but it doesn't one-hit. That's great. Like, this change, hopefully it doesn't one-hit anymore. Hopefully, because otherwise what would be the point, right? That'd be great. And then dropped from the Warp Prism to make it less of a harassed unit. Very specific, targeted kind of a nerf, but I think it should work pretty well. Mentioned in previous updates, we like to take another look at the Colossus role in Protoss splash damage, with the High Templar filling the role of general splash damage, Disruptor dealing burst damage. We want to push the Colossus towards a consistent anti-light armor role. Light armor is such a weird, because it's light unit or an armored unit. Well, it's really a light armored unit. It's like, we can do better than that, right? There's got to be better nomenclature to use than that. That's more intuitive, right? Anyway, in addition, the external thermal lance upgrade is perhaps too much power locked behind it for the Colossus's more niche role. So we're looking to make it easier to obtain. Damage change from 12 to 10, 15 versus light. Okay, overall, higher average DPS by a little bit. Damage per upgrade changed from 1 to 1 plus 1 light. Range increased. They messing with the extended thermal lance again. Cool. Interesting. I mean, this kind of all feels good to me. Having a little bit more specific roles between when to use a Colossus, when to use a Disruptor, and then when to use a High Templar, right? That seems pretty cool. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out. I hate the Colossus just as a unit. It's this towering unit that can be hit by any unit and any spell ever, all of them, which is a weird vulnerability to deal with. And so to deal with it, you have to kind of clump all your units around them to keep them protected. It's really important. Colossus alone is a dead Colossus for the most part. And it's just the fact that the splash damage goes like this instead of out forward makes it this really boring. If you micro it, you're probably doing the wrong thing. Like 90% of the time, you probably just want to A move. I prefer like opt-in micro, where it's like the mediocre choice is to A move. But if you micro this unit, you can get some more out of it. Sort of opt-in idea. I like that a lot more. And so I think that carriers with vertical splash instead of horizontal splash make that sort of, okay, you're going to do some damage this way. That's great. But if you're using it in a choke, it's going to do more damage. Or if you manage to use it with a warp prism and get a flank and attack their line with like a strafe attack, that will also be more. That's cool. That's interesting. But you don't really get that kind of a scenario with the Colossus as it is. Especially the idea of like Colossus being able to hold a choke. By having a vertical splash, that'd be pretty neat. Anyway. Carrier. For the carrier, want to slightly increase the cost of their interceptors. Oh, we're back at 15. We've been at 15 before, right? It's a powerful in-game unit. Feedback from the community is it can overperform in this role due to easily replacing lost interceptors. I mean, yes. The problem with the carrier was never the interceptors were too expensive. That was the problem with the carrier, was always it takes too long to build. So transitioning carriers was too hard. And they made it strong, so now transitioning carriers, okay. It's a strong move. It's worth the payoff, but I think you could make it a little more of a soft relationship, I think, between those two things. High Templar's abilities and roles are already in solid state. Instead, we want to try and make the unit slightly easier to use. Interesting. The High Templar has an attack. Huh. Where have I seen that before? They probably came up with this on their own, but in the off case that they decided to implement it because of Vanguard, that would be adorable. That would be great. That would make me really happy. But so, talking about this is a huge accessibility feature. The attack doesn't have to do any damage at all. The only thing that this attack needs to do is keep the High Templar at range, so when you attack move with your army, your spellcaster doesn't run into the enemy unit. The same thing can be said about observers. The same thing can be said about anything that doesn't have an attack. Defilers, infestors, right? All relatively important things. Just had to check that. So, the idea that this is happening to the High Templar, great. I would love to see this happen for everyone that doesn't have an attack. And one way to do that is to give it an attack. And that's sort of, okay, that's fine. Another way to do it is to give all units that don't have an attack an ability in its place that keeps them at range of enemies. So when you issue an attack move to a High Templar, it will only go within 6 range of an enemy unit or structure. But if you do a move command, it'll just move, just like it always has. And if you do that, you don't have overseers just running into enemy armies and dying over and over again. That's annoying. You don't have observers doing the same thing. You don't have defilers casting their spells or getting too close, or infestors, whatever unit. So I think all units without an attack should either have an attack. Wait, that would take them out of the category. Should have a keep at range ability. And I think that. Oh man. I've never made a video for this long. Not sure, I probably have, but there we are. In any case, more of this shit should happen. Either an ability that keeps them at range, or giving all these people attacks. Because guess what? It's not going to make the positive effect it's going to have on new players is so much bigger than the negative effect it'll have on professional players that can basically punish players that aren't good by getting an advantage because they made a mistake. I mean, on the other side, you don't have to do anything. It doesn't take any skill to kill your enemy's units that are marching into your army that don't have an attack, right? There's no skill in that. There's no fun in that it's just, he screwed up. Woo, thank God I get this advantage. That's cool. It's just sort of this lucky thing, which is not, I don't know, it's not StarCraft to me. So the idea of adding this weapon is really cool. Maybe they'll have more of this type of stuff coming in the future. Preferably a keep it range ability, so that way you don't have to give all these spellcasters attacks. I like the idea of a non-attacking spellcaster. But you know, it's a step in the right direction. It's very, very cool. It makes me quite happy. Removal of the mothership core. Adjusted abilities, the mothership itself, not the final state. Starting point. Gotcha. Now built directly from the Nexus. No longer can cast Photon Overcharge. Thank God. Mass Recall now works like the Nexus version. All units will now be recalled to the mothership, so you can have the mothership actually sneak into somewhere, like an enemy base, and teleport your army into it. Oh man. That's back. That's really cool. Which is great because Recall is this powerful ability. And I've moved really far away from the microphone. Recall is this really powerful ability that in the early game, we used to see it before, where Mothership Core could just kind of run in, turn into a giant attacking thing, recall units to it. It was insane. It was a lot of fun, but it was insane. So moving this more aggressive recall to a super late game unit, I think is safe. It's really powerful, but it's put on this super late game unit. Shouldn't be a problem at all. I'm really liking the change to recall in general. And the mothership will now just have recall and time warp. Okay, pretty neat. Observer. While we don't want to make Protoss ability gameplay any more complicated, we try making Observer more useful for ladder players. Currently, Observers are selected. Yep. With select all army button by default, which can often bring observers out of position to their untimely demise. While we'd like to keep observers in the selection, we're considering adding the ability to deploy your observer for increased vision range in exchange for being unable to move. It's so crazy, like, because we talk about this shit all of the time. Like, we're in the middle of implementing this for Vanguard. We've taken it off the F2 for the time being. We might end up sticking with that implementation, but like, had we more humans to implement, we definitely would be using this exact idea. More vision, deploy. Yep. All right. Since last year's update, we have seen, all right, we're on the Zerg now. The Zerg. A number of new strategies and tactics come from the Zerg. This time around, we're looking encouraging more direct interaction with creep spread. Interesting. Again, another macro. Creep is a macro mechanic. It grants you vision instead of money and stuff, but it is still this sort of rote task that just sort of contributes to your overall ability to win the video game in a very sort of vague way. So I group it in there with macro mechanics. You might disagree. That's totally fine. It's not necessary for this argument. So that's interesting. Creep spread from the Zerg. Wanted to increase the utility of the lurker. I love lurkers. More utility for lurkers sounds great. Just we wanted to look into experimenting with Zerg ground-based and a lot of defenders stuff. The idea of things working better with creep means defender's advantage, and it's already strong for Zerg on creep because speed, and speed is really valuable, especially for melee units or short-range units. So more advantages for that. It's great. Ground-based anti-air options outside of the Queen and Hydralisk. Oh my god. I want a tier 1 Hydra, but I'll take this instead. Having some significant ground-to-air action for Zerg at all would be pretty beautiful. Especially outside of the Queen, which is this really weird unit. It's had such an interesting evolution, and it's in such a weird spot. It's this unit that you can it kind of does everything. If you're a new player, just building tons of queens is great for you. It heals. It does a whole bunch of stuff. It's really an all-around unit, and it's pretty much got to stay on the creep, which is again it's sort of its own little installation of defender's advantage, which is kind of nice. I look forward to this testing process. We want to make sure that Zerg has enough aggressive options before late game, so they don't feel heavily pressured into only defensive play. Look at this. Look at this language. they're telling us what they want to happen, which is really cool. They're letting us behind the curtain a little bit, like, hey, this is what we want to happen. And hopefully there's this implication with that of like, we're willing to do the thing that will cause the effect to happen that we want to happen. We're looking for the effect. We're not committed to our own idea being the thing that causes that effect. Any idea that causes that effect is valuable to us. I'm feeling a little bit of that implication. Maybe that's true. Keep your fingers crossed and hope. We're gonna find out. Let's see if that's the case. For the Infestor, we want to try experimenting, making the unit interact more with creep. We all want to see if we could reduce some of the game-ending potential of fungal growth while keeping it as a strong disable area of effectability. People have been talking a lot about burrowed infestors casting fungal. Burrowed cast is huge. Burrowed infestors casting fungal is frustrating. Anything that has a burrow move or a cloak is going to be frustrating. It's going to be annoying, and there has to be enough counterplay measures in place available for that to be a fun interaction. Oh, he's got burrowed infestors, but I know where he's moving around and can use my area of effect spells to kill his units, or, you know, this less binary interaction between like, I have a detector, I'm fine. I don't have a detector, I'm dead, right? Making cloaked units less binary is, I think, a really powerful thing to do, really important thing to do. So hopefully we see a little bit of that. In the very least, the fungal is being addressed. The fungal being this stun that has very little counterplay. It's a skill shot now. It didn't used to be. So a little bit more counterplay than before, but we're looking at some probably defender's advantage type buffs, like buff for defense but not for offense kind of things. It will not hit air units. Huge nerf, especially because air units overlap. And those units hit off creep will now be slowed instead of rooted. Been suggested many, many times, not the off creep part, but the slow instead of the root. At the same time, those units are hit on creep are now rooted to the creep. And the overall radius is bigger. You have to compensate in some way. This is really, ooh, man. Closely watching this. And the idea of adding anti-air, I don't know what their idea for adding anti-air is, but if they add stronger anti-air, maybe a tier 3 anti-air, tier 2.5, something like that. All right, the Broodlord and the Ultralisk not being able to shoot up, having a late game anti-air would be really cool. We'll see. Making sure they have sufficient options, especially long range. A longer range anti-air tool would be great. The infested Terran ability for the Infestor is also being changed. Currently, the unit is used as a last resort, and we think there is potential to make it a bit more useful. But we don't want infested Terrans to become a main army composition. Neither do I, neither do most of us. Instead, we're trying out having infested Terrans move into an anti-air role with a weaker anti-ground attack. This is not the solution that I would look at for the buff to anti-air. Let's see. Implementation time. No longer hits air. Immobilize. It's a 50% slow, which is pretty good. Pretty baller. Not oppressive, but pretty baller. 2 to 2.5 is quite nice. All right. It now benefits from upgrades. Damage decreased. The Gauss rifle. Oh, the Gauss rifle. I was like, wait, it's an anti-air, but it doesn't hit air. New weapon, acid spores. 6 range, 14 damage, 0.9 attack speed. That's pretty strong. And it's prioritized over the ground weapon. And they spawn faster on creep. Okay, this is cool. This is a really cool, right? The biggest things that we can take away from stuff like this are trends, philosophies, ideas. Where is Blizzard going with StarCraft 2? Those are the things we can start to pull from this and either be, you know, elated or depressed, depending on how you feel about it. I'm tending towards elated here. This is quite good. So we're seeing these themes of like, let's have the Zerg interact with the creep more. Let's make the creep important. Let's make the creep matter, which is very cool. And it'll help bring home a lot of things like overextending on creep is this kind of nebulous thing where you sort of feel it, but it's not implicit as a new player. You sort of feel like, moving on to creep seems like a dangerous thing and I should have an overwhelming force if I'm gonna be moving on to creep. Different stuff like infested Terran spawn faster, you get fully rooted by fungal, things like that will definitely help to make that decision earlier on in a new player's journey of like realizing, oh, I have to respect the creep, don't overextend on creep, make sure you have an overwhelming force before you move out on it, or spend time fighting the creep back, all right? That to me is a pretty interesting interaction, and moving players towards that faster will be good. I think that these more tangible sort of telegraphs of, hey, watch out when you're on creep, will be helpful for that. So kind of a deep cut, but I think it'll happen. Now the lurker. We like its current role as a zone controller, but we think that its current window of use is a bit too small. This is due to a combination of Lurker Den being soft locked behind the important Hydralisk Muscular Augments upgrade, and when games go late, detection can heavily reduce their effectiveness. Okay. What? Whoa. Okay. I didn't read that aloud because I was busy minding my balloons. So the Lurker Den is going to be its own building. It can be made from a drone. Hydralisk Den is the tech requirement. Can we please make Hydra's tier 1? It won't happen. It won't happen this change, but maybe next year. See, with this kind of a cycle, we can have hope for stuff like tier 1 Hydras. Even if it's tiny and way in the distance, we can hope for it. Okay. New upgrade called Digging Claws on the Lurker Den, which increases Lurker's move speed and burrow speed. Very cool. Give a Lurker more late game utility when detectors are more numerous. I love speed upgrades. I love speed upgrades for Zerg. It's the Zergy thing to do, get a speed upgrade. If a unit doesn't have a speed upgrade, it probably should. I really like that. The idea of Zerg being the swarmy, quick, be all over the place. Man, I'm already getting excited to play this test map. This is really cool. No mutate to Lurker Den. Oh God, no! They're keeping that abysmally long build time. I think this is really the problem. It's not. I don't think the problem is that it's locked behind muscular augments. I think it's the problem that the Lurker Den remains the longest build time in the game, tied with the carrier. Like, it's so long to build a Lurker Den. And I was hoping that the morph, they would reduce the build time a little bit, but no. It's so long. It's so long. I would so much rather just take the time it takes to build muscular augments out of the time that it takes to get the Lurker Den, maybe? Cut the Lurker Den time, build time, morph time in half? Like, then you have that decision between, do I want earlier Lurkers or do I want better Hydras now? Maybe that's never a decision, and, you know, in the current game state, that'll just not work out. But the main point is, the problem with Lurkers, in my opinion, it's the same problem that carriers have. Is they Lurker Den take so long to build that you just it just takes too long. It closes the window. The window that they're talking about is getting closed pretty significantly by these 86 seconds. Oh, the upgrade requires Hive. Oh my God, I just read requires Hive and I was like, what? Lurkers are tier 3? Another ground only tier 3 unit? No. Not the case, just the upgrade. Cool, late game upgrade. 4.55 is a pretty respectable speed. Wonder how much the burrow time is being reduced by, but the idea you can just move in, lift up, move around, root, unroot. Pretty neat. Burrow, unburrow. Cool. The Viper. Parasitic Bomb. All or nothing mass cast attack. Thank you, rapid fire parasitic bomb. You want to get as many parasitic bombs ready as possible and cast them all at once to destroy the enemy quickly. We want to keep the ability as a strong anti-air option, but make it no longer exponentially grow in power. No overlap, no overlap, no overlap, no overlap. By increasing its damage, a Viper user can be more confident about targeted enemies being destroyed. No longer stacked with other parasitic bomb effects, damage doubled. Yes. I know a lot of you all have been asking for this change for a while. No stacking. And I love it. See, we're seeing another trend here. Another trend which is really encouraging. Spellcasters moved more towards this can have a powerful impact on your army by having one or a few of them, 1, 2, 3 of them mixed in with your army can be powerful. This helps, I think, a lot make unit compositions more complex, because if you only need a few of a unit to be effective, then you can have a more complex army composition because those resources are free up to be spent on other units, which may be the same that you already have, maybe new units. It creates a lot of potential. So that happening is cool. One of my favorite things about Vanguard, and one of the things that I hope gets sort of pushed into StarCraft over time, is the diverse unit compositions and the inability for players to competitively mass one unit and win. The advantage that grows with unit complexity. The more different units you can have and use effectively in your army, the better. For the most part. It's a general trend. It's not an absolute statement. For the most part. Cool. Very cool change for the parasitic bomb. Gonna feel a lot nicer with that. And the other thing too is this makes splitting more reasonable. So if the relationship is only a few Vipers, a couple of parasitic bombs, now all of a sudden there's some play there. I have 2 parasitic bombs on my air army. I'm going to separate those units out. Great, crisis averted, counterplay is happening. Rather than, oh my god, everything's screwed, I have parasitic bombs on everything, what'll I ever do? This does move into one-hit kill on the Mutalisk. That's the other interesting thing, right? 90 hit points to 180. We're going into one-hit kill on a lot of units now, which is interesting. It might be... I think the overall effect, because the way they're explaining it, I think if the overall effect happens the way they think it will, I'm inclined to believe that it will, then I think that this is going to have an overall positive effect on lethality. Although the individual spell itself is more lethal. This should have a sort of decreasing lethality overall kind of a situation. We'll see. We'll see if it happens. Or if people will just keep stacking, be like, oh, Parasitic Bomb does 180 damage? Great, I'm gonna make even more Vipers. We'll find out. But the point is, they're trying to do a particular thing. If it doesn't work out this way, they're not gonna do it, right? It's about assessing the goals that Blizzard has and saying, oh, wow, I really like that goal. Let's work together towards it. Rather than being like, this particular path to get to this goal is not as good as my way because I came up with my way and I have an ego, right? Like pushing that shit aside and being like, all right, what are we trying to get to? Let's get there together, kind of a thing. Hopefully that is the direction things are going. Overseer. Much like the Observer, we wanted to try making the Overseer less likely to run to its doom if a player was intending for them to hold position somewhere. Aha. The Overseer. The Overseer. See, this kind of a role, like staying still and getting more vision, makes sense. It's an Overseer. It's got all these eyes and stuff. It's pretty cool. But it's not something like I've always used Overlords, and maybe, you know, come back at me with the way you use these units. But for me, I've always used Overlords to cover the airspace, and Overseers is more of like have them around for detection against DTs with my army, moving ahead a little bit to get shots on lurkers, stuff like that. But this is really neat. Being able to use the Overseer in this way is going to be interesting. And the 25% more vision, it lends more to this zone control defense. Zone control is a map, sorry. The zone vision defense, I guess we can call it. That you just sort of, instead of following your army around with observers or overseers, you just kind of like put units in places where you create a field of vision around your base, so that way you get this early detection system. And the whole unable to move thing is perfect too, because you just want it to be sitting there. You don't want it to get chased away by units and pushed around. You want it to hold its position until it's done. Well, I do anyway. Maybe you don't. Let me know. For the swarm hosts who want to increase the counterplay options. Oh, they're even saying counterplay. Oh my god, finally. Holy crap. This has been like a 3-year struggle to get Blizzard to say the word counterplay in an official post. Counterplay was a coin and a game design concept created by Riot Games in League of Legends. And so you'll notice over the past 3 years, Blizzard has started adopting this idea of counterplay being an important part of a competitive video game and calling it micro at the same time. And that's what counterplay is. But they've been, seeming intentionally, they've been avoiding the word counterplay or the phrase counterplay, probably as to not use Riot's word for it, but to use their own word for it instead, which is this thing that happens a lot in companies, right? You have like, the Blu-ray and then the HD player way back in the day when that was happening. Everyone tries to make their own thing, their proprietary thing, control the words, be the one who created the words. But counterplay is just so much, it's just a better word than micro at the same time, right? Or phrase rather. The fact that Blizzard is literally saying counterplay is... We're making progress, boys. We're making some serious progress here. Good things are happening. By slowing down its movement speed off creep to that of the siege tank and immortal, opposing players should have an easier time counter-attacking swarm hosts. Its move speed on creep is unchanged, however, keeping creep spread very appealing to a swarm host user. Interesting. It's an interesting way to do it. Like creep spread on a flank where swarm hosts might go to unleash an attack on you. Is sort of a forewarning sign. You can spend time fighting against the creep. In general, I like this path of making the creep more important. It is a beautiful, visually representative mechanic in the game that I think is being underutilized currently. And to see more things happening with the creep is really good, I think, because the creep means power for the Zerg. And it's always meant that, but now that it's going to be happening in a more overt way, now it'll be more clear to the player. This is the Zerg thing. It looks like the Zerg thing. It is the Zerg thing. This looks like it's a dangerous place to move out onto. It is for these very concrete reasons. Zerg units move faster isn't really too appealing, too strong to a new player. Like Zerg units move faster. It's like, okay, whatever, they move faster. I'll still win in a fight. The fact that we have these concrete changes helps a lot, and the idea of being able to see visually the territory of an RTS player on a minimap is relatively important, especially if that territory means something, is valuable, is an indicator toward the likelihood of success, of victory of a player. Having all those things come together, I think, is important. And so this movement speed thing with the swarm host, I'm not a huge fan of the swarm host for a variety of reasons. I'm not a huge fan of it in its old form, its new form, whatever. This will be interesting. I don't have a strong opinion on it, really. And finally, the disclaimer. Keep in mind this is a first pass and design update for November this year. Things may look very different as testing goes on, and probably will. Numbers changing, new changes being added, other areas being rolled back. We're excited to see the potential these changes have for StarCraft 2 multiplayer community. And the test matchmaking queue will be activated soon. Please let us know what you think in the comments below and have fun. StarCraft Remastered gets released, and at the same time, almost, what is it, a day later, 2 days later, they reaffirm this vision of strategy and high change to contrast the Brood War low change mechanical sheer athleticism side, really sort of giving this distinct feel to both games. It seems intentional. I hope it's intentional. If it's not, I hope it just happens. But the idea that there are multiple different ways to enjoy RTS, and that it's okay to get enjoyment out of it in different ways, and having options for each type of player. Like, if you love mechanics, play Brood War. It is this amazing feat of athleticism, mentally, physically, being able to do those things, juggle the tasks in your head, decide what you're going to spend your attention on, where and when. You can't do everything at the same time. It's impossible. So much more impossible than it is in StarCraft 2. So you have to deal with that, and that's its own cool thing. And then the ever-changing world where the person who can improvise and come up with new ideas and creative strategies can do well in StarCraft 2. That idea that the part of the makeup of a professional player is not just to know what to do, but to be able to figure out what to do and to be able to improvise in different and new scenarios is really exciting. And I like that we're giving, I say we, the StarCraft community, let's say, are giving professional players and regular players different paths to go on depending on where their strengths are and depending on what they enjoy more. If you enjoy the strategy and the decision making being the primary thing that leads to success and victory, come check out StarCraft 2. The mechanics aren't as harsh or as difficult. It's not as athletic, but strategy is a bigger thing. Or do you really love injects? Do you just love when you get the perfect inject? Well, if you love that feeling, you're gonna love Brood War. Go play Brood War. When you get your perfect timing on all of your workers going exactly where they need to go, and you're microing your 5 different control groups of 12 units, and they come down, they all combine just in the right perfect way, and you've basically defeated that 12 unit only selection, that's gonna feel amazing. Trust me. Like, I've played a lot of Brood War, I've played a lot of StarCraft 2, and I love them both for different reasons. They both have different ways of doing the RTS thing. So try it out. Oh man. Oh wow, under 2 hours, not too bad. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out. We haven't done a tea time in a long time, been meaning to restart the tea time vlog series where I just talk about things that I've been thinking about, but things have been so busy and I can just make excuses all day about why I haven't been doing tea times, but I want to start doing them again on a weekly basis. Really, I want to do the show called Being Better. That's just sheerly basically a community accountability show where we try to improve our lives together. And then tea time, which is me just talking about cool stuff. And then the rest of my time will be spent on Vanguard stuff because that's that's what's going on. That's my life right now. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. I'm very lucky to have the friends that I have and to have succeeded in the way that I've succeeded over the time. And I'm very lucky to have the support of you. So thank you for watching. As always, my name is JaKaTaK. Crap, I fucked that up. My name is JaKaTaK, and as always, thanks for watching. If you have any ideas for a video, please leave with any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, or anything beginning with letter C in the comment section below, and I'll see you again soon. I think I got it.